Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about still drawing. So if you are into art or drawing in general, beginners or experienced, have you ever asked yourself how to start still drawing, like drawing objects that don't move, which is like a great practice, especially if you are a beginner, to understand drawing and get into art more, and to understand the proportions, what proportion means, so how to deal with different type of pencils, also what the HP pencil does, what the 12B does, and so on. So to understand all of that, we have something we call still drawing, as you see here. Like for example, this drawing, or maybe like a different one, like for example fruit, or type of glass, or anything like doesn't move at all, like not organic, for example, this kind of drawing. So today we are going to go step by step how to start, or how to draw objects, or how to draw in general still drawing. And for that I have prepared this painting, as you see, so as a reference. And especially if you are a beginner, it's very, very helpful to actually use images or references, real images, or just 1 second, please, just to fix my camera. So to use this kind of images as a reference, to copy paste them and to draw from them, because and especially if you are a beginner, it's going to be very hard to actually imagine how proportions might look like, how the scale of this fruit should be in compared to the other object. And that's why so beginners and experienced still use references as so images as references to start with and to draw with, because this is actually the best practice you can do. So for example, we have this image, right? So the first thing I want to do is to define as where the object starts, which is the ground. So as you see here, I have a blank page. So now what I can do is just draw just a line, simple line, right? Just to define where my ground is, so where everything sits, right? So for that, I have my very first line here. You don't have to draw a very hard line, just a very simple line to define where your ground should be. And the second thing I want to do is actually where the object ends, which is actually the very upper point of my object, which is actually this one. So my object starts here and ends approximately like here. So when you have this position, you also just draw a very simple line. Now I have two lines which defines the proportion and the scale of my object, or of my drawing, or of the components of my image, right? So now the next move is I want to define where this bear is, where this type of fruit is, so where it sits, where it starts, where it ends. So it starts right here, as you see, and I do have the line already here. So let's say we have the beer here, so it's approximately like if I put my pen here, on this type of vase or this kind of component, so the pear or the piece of fruit makes approximately the half of it if we take this scale, right? So which means the half is approximately like here. So why I'm doing these lines, why I'm putting these lines, this will help me to understand and to draw the right proportions of my image, right? So once we do that, now I have the proportion of the image, right? So now I have where the two objects start, where they end, and the pair, so where this object, or where this piece of fruit ends. So now I can start drawing the pear, which is kind of like circle-y shape. So I can start with a very, very simple shape, very simple circle. as you see, it doesn't have to be exactly like the shape of the pear, right? So I'm just now defining the proportion where what is, right? So now I have this circle, which tells me where this piece of fruit should be. And now, as you see here, I can see and look. So 1 second on my paper, 1 second on the image. So your eye should be always moving constantly, back and forth, back and forth. You cannot just keep focusing on the paper and completely forget about it, because you might make a mistake and just go further and further, and which makes it a little bit difficult to go backwards, right? And that's why proportions at the beginning of your drawing is extremely important. Yeah. So now, as you see here, so let's define the base shape of this jar or this vase. Yeah. So as you see, to simplify this shape, I cannot, so if I use a circle, it won't be very helpful. But if I simplify it to actually a rectangle, very simple rectangle, like if I go, let me use my pen here. So for example, if I want to simplify, so when we did the pear, as you see, 1 second, please. Just choose the right pen. Here we go. So when we make it simple, we just select, as you see here, it's kind of circle. And if I want to make this object, also this component, simpler or easy to understand, I can break it down into this shape. It's not 100% rectangle, but actually kind of like cone, yeah? So if I want to make it simple, so if I follow now these objects, so this shape, and start drawing it here, it's gonna immediately help me to understand where this vase should be. Here we go. And now, as you see, I have two very simple shapes, which is circle and kind of like cone. But this tells me and helps me a lot moving forwards to continue adding these details and the graves and so on. So now I stop for a second and check, are my proportions accurate? Are my proportions correct? Or do they look weird? If they are looking weird, like for example, if I would have drawn this bear way too bigger than this, then the proportion will look very odd and very not accurate, right? Because as you see here, you have to always compare or check your proportions, not only the overall proportion, but also the proportion of each component in compared to the other. And now, as you see here, it's kind of like look correct, right? So now I can deep dive or continue adding this cone, so this object, which I can again make it simple to very simple triangle. So as you see, I'm just making it simple now, right? Then afterwards, I start diving into more details and so on and so on. And this, also the hand of the vase, is kind of like oval. So if I draw it now, here we go. So now we have the main proportions of the objects, right? So now I can start adding some more details, like the top of it. And the bottom part of it, which will be a little bit circular, yeah, like this. And we have the table right here where everything sits. So now I can confidently remove this line, the bottom line, because it's not needed anymore. I have my proportions already. And that line was only like to help me understand and to get the right proportions. And now, as you can see, everything looks fine and it looks like it's sitting on the table, right? So now I can start adding more details into my pair, which is, as you see here, it's not 100% circular. It's kind of like have this kind of shape right here, and it goes like this. So as you notice, when I start drawing any object, I start with rectangle, triangle, oval, and circle, because when you make it simple, it gets much easier for you to understand and to break down the component of the image. It doesn't matter how complex it is, to simple shapes to give you the right proportions. Here we go. So now I'm going to continue a little bit fast. We don't need this line anymore because it was only helping line. Here we go. And we don't need this line as well. Now I notice, as you see here, it's kind of like too tight from the top. So because I'm still at the beginning of my drawing, I can simply and very easily adjust it a little bit and make it a little bit thicker, because I noticed that it's way too thin. So we can make it a little bit bigger or thicker to match the proportions of my image or reference image. Here we go. And now we can start drawing the grapes, which are very simple because it's very circular shape. So the first one is here. We start adding it. Once we have it, we don't see the rear or the rear line of the face. Yeah. So first grape, few at the background, in the background. Here we go. And now I add a few here. As you can see, I'm going to remove a little bit of the top of my face, because as you see here, the grape is kind of like covering this area. Here we go. Maybe a little bit smaller. It's bigger one. Just very simple circles, as you see here. Here we go. Now I stop for a second and check my proportions again. Is everything correct? Does anything looks weird or way too big or way too small? If everything looks fine, then I continue. Here we go. I can start adding more details further and further. So far I'm using P2. So now it doesn't harm to switch to P4, which is a little bit darker, just to highlight my lines, my main shape as well, my main components. Not everything, not all lines, but just a few to give me more kind of like feeling as to how my components in that image looks like. Thank you for watching, everyone. So I hope you are enjoying my stream and find it very helpful. And if you are not subscribed to my channel, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe, if you are into art or drawing. So yeah, in my channel, I mostly cover drawing per pencil or ink, sometimes in digital drawing as well, so using my iPad. So I try to cover all kinds of variety of drawing. So as you see, mainly I actually focus on pencil drawing. But yeah, sometimes, so if you are into art, you can check my channel, subscribe if you want, of course, which helped me grow my channel. So you can check it out, and especially if you are into art. So some videos are for beginners, some videos are a little bit advanced, so you can check it out and see if it's really helpful for you. Here we go. So as you see now, we kind of like, so our image or our component or our so the component of our image start visualizing itself, and I now started already seeing my image more accurately, more properly, and all of that is because my proportions were correct at the beginning, and that's why I cannot emphasize enough how important proportions are. They are way too important, more than you think. Because if your proportions are correct from the very beginning, then it leads you to nice drawing and nice proportions and so on. But if your proportions are correct and you keep adding more details with a wrong looking proportions, it's going to be way too difficult to go backwards and fix this. And especially if you start shading and you have lighting, shading, and so on, it's going to be super difficult to remove this line and fix it. And even if you do, it won't look that clean, right? Here we go. Maybe adding some branches here, very small. Here we go. As you see here, we have these lines that kind of like shape the bottom part of this vase, and I can also draw them. As you see, the first line starts, proportions are always important, don't forget about that. So the first line starts from actually the top of this bear, so which is actually this line. And as you see, I cannot draw very 100% vertical or horizontal line because this face is actually rounded, right? So when it's rounded, it means this line goes from this direction from the right to the left. When it does, it looks, so it goes this way, so this way, this direction. When it does, it gives me this kind of like curve looking lines, right? And this is something I need to take into consideration by making my lines a little bit curvy here. As you see, it's not 100% horizontal, but a little bit curvy. Here we go. Here we go. So now, as you see, I have my drawing. Everything looks fine. Proportions, scales, position, direction, everything looks perfect. Yeah. Now I can start shading. Shading is a big topic. It's completely different topic than drawing. It's one important element of drawing, but you cannot apply the same rule that we talked about in our drawing into shading. Shading has its different rules, which are important, and I'm going to talk about it right now. So shading means, let me move to this object a little bit. So as you see here, let me just move it back a little bit. So as you can see here, so when you look at it, you kind of like feel or get the feeling where the light is coming from. Let me just remove this one a little bit back. There we go. So as you see here, we were talking about this one. So when you first look at it, you kind of like get the feeling where the light is coming from, right? The light is actually coming from this area. Why? Because if you look at this apple, the light is actually hitting this surface, makes it a little bit brighter, and make the rear side or the back side of the apple way darker. Yeah. And this is, as a light source, is the first element or the first component that you need to consider when it comes to shading, by asking yourself the very important question in this drawing. Now we go back to our drawing, where the light is coming from. So if you look at it again, so the light up directly tells me that it's actually coming from this direction, hitting this area, making it brighter, and making everything behind it, the other side of these objects, darker. And this applies to all of these three objects: the phase, the grape, and the pear as well. As you see here, let me just remove it. As you see, the pear is actually the light source, sorry. The light source is hitting these areas, and these areas are completely in the shadow, in the dark area. And this is something we need to consider and be careful about. So going back to our drawing again, the light is coming from this area. It doesn't harm at all to draw few very simple light lines to define where your light source coming from. So as you see, I just defined, or I used like three. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Just 1 second, please. So adjust my camera. Here we go. I think now it's better. Here we go. So as you see, now I have my light direction. So it means everything on the right needs to be brighter than the other side. And this is something now we can start with. So when you start shading, it's very important that you start from the biggest shadow area, moving up to the bright area, and not the other way around. Why? Because if you start from shading this area, which is brighter, it's going to be very difficult to figure out how bright you should be and how dark you should be here. And that's why it's actually easier, much easier, yeah, to start from the dark area, which is actually the left side of these two objects, moving up to the bright area. This is very important rule, and this is actually what works for me, yeah, and for many artists as well. If you are really experienced and very advanced, you can start wherever you want, yeah. But we are talking about a beginner lesson here and a beginner session. That's my advice for you, biggest tip for you when it comes to shading. Start from the dark area, yeah. So it means we have this area needs to be dark, and this area. And you might ask yourself why I'm using this kind of like line direction. When it comes to shading, let me just grab a piece of paper. When it comes to shading, there are many different type of shading, yeah? So there is like a scratch shading, and we have the oval shape shading. We have the vertical shading. We have also the smudges shading, where you have like kind of very, very dark tone, and you start using either your eraser or even your finger or any kind of like tissue, or even this, if you have like Faber-Castell pencil, there is also very specific and unique pencil. You cannot draw with it, but you can actually make smudges, as you see. So if I use now, just one example, my 10B pencil, which is super dark, as you see, and I can now use this to actually make smudges. And as you see, it kind of like gives me very nice gradient and to help me shades and go from dark area to bright area. Thank you very everyone for your comments. I hope you are enjoying it. So now going back to which type of just one second, please. Here we go. So there are also different, more than these type when it comes to shadings. So hatches, so the hatch drawing, it goes like one direction. So either this way or this way or this way, it doesn't matter. Or we have cross hatches, which means you use two lines, one in one direction and the other is the opposite direction. This is cross hatches. And we have tonal. Tonal is kind of like very circular shape. So you start going this way from dark to bright area. Let me take another piece of paper. Just one second, please. Here we go. And we have stipple. Stipple is the most time-consuming shading type, which is actually goes this way. Like wherever you have a dark area, you increase the amount of dots you put, and when you move to the bright area, you reduce this amount, which gives you actually kind of like the shading feeling, you know. But this is super time consuming. So what I'm used for is actually the hatch. So you can try it out. So any type of shading type you feel comfortable with, but it also depends on the object you are drawing or the component. So for example, if you are drawing a portrait, then if I use a hatch shading type, then it's going to look very rough and it won't look smooth. So it really depends on the object. So if you compare, for example, this portrait to this drawing, as you see, using hatch shading type on this object was super helpful. Why? Because the material of this object is metal, which is highly reflective. Highly reflective means it allows me to use very noisy, not calm shading type, which is the hatch. Yeah. So going back, without diving into too much details, yeah, because I don't want to make it boring for you. So going back to our drawing here, yeah. So we said we start with the dark area. So having that said, I start just making this area a little bit darker, and I stop right here. Yeah, I don't go further. Then now, the same for the bear, and the same for the small grapes. Here we go. The same here. As you see here, I'm not touching any area from the right. Yeah, and just defining where my shadow will be. Here we go. The same goes for these two as well, and this one. Here we go. So now, as you can see, when you look at it, you immediately get and understand where the light is coming from. It immediately tells you that the light is coming from the right, and it's hitting all of these surfaces. Wherever it's on the right side of my image is illuminated and highlighted, and the opposite side is darker. So now I can start adding more tone. By adding more tone, you're gonna be careful, yeah, because as you see here, looking back to our image, so you need to figure out which is the darkest object of your image, which is actually the grape, right? This is the darkest. So if you compare the grape to this object, the vase, the grape is way much darker than this. So now we have to analyze, make a very quick quick overview, on the tone, so which is the darkest, which is a little bit brighter, and which is the brightest object. The darkest one is the grape. A little bit brighter object is the bear. Then the brightest object in my drawing is actually the vase. And this is something we need to apply in our drawing. So now, as you see, now all of my components are kind of like the same tone, and that's why I need to add more tones into my grape, because as we said, it's the darkest object. So now I'm using B4. Now I can switch back to B2 or B12. There is no problem at all. Why? Because as we said, the grape is the darkest one, and that's why I switched now to 14, B14, which is really dark, as you can clearly see now. Here we go. The same goes for this one. And that one. Here we go. As you see, so when I come closer and closer to the bright area, I reduce my shading and my lines, which gives me this kind of like gradient feeling, so from dark to bright. So now I can now adding more tones into this area. This area is kind of like the bottom area of the hand, which will be a little bit dark. Why? Because the light is hitting from this direction, so this will definitely be dark because it's covered. Here we go. And now I can move to the second brightest object in my image, in my drawing, which is the bear. Let me choose maybe B4. As you notice, I changed the line direction of my shading. There is no harm in that because this is actually the hatch and cross hatch shading type. So you can choose whatever fits you and feel comfortable with. And so me personally, when it comes to very smooth object like a bear or like a banana or apple, I use hatch and cross hatch because it gives you this kind of like smooth material feeling, right? But when it comes to very hard and tough material like this metal or stainless steel, then as you notice, I used only one direction because it gives you this kind of very rough feeling, right, of the material. So which means in conclusion, the material of your object, when it comes to shading, the material of your object that you are drawing and shading is super important. You have to really look at it and think for a few seconds and analyze what kind of material does this grape has. Does it need to be smooth or does it need to be hard or so and so on. So the material is very, very important. What kind of material and texture your object is. Here we go. Here we go. So as you see, now I can understand the lighting more and more, and the whole component and the whole drawing and the whole image looks much better now because light source and lighting is very, very important in my drawing, also in the drawing. And especially if it's accurate, sorry, and your shadows as well, having the right tone. So as you see now, I moved to my vase. And when I do that, I need to be careful. I cannot make it way too dark. Why? Because the vase, as we said previously, is actually the brightest object or component in my drawing. And that's why when I do that, I start shading it. I really need to be careful not to overdo this and end up having it very dark in compared to the other components. So you gotta be careful a little bit with it. Here we go. As you notice, I don't focus on one area and completely forgot the other. So I'm moving kind of like parallel on all components at the same time, which is very important in my opinion, to keep your drawing harmonized and all of them have the same feeling, you know. So as you see here now, I can start shading my table a little bit, just a little bit, yeah, because even the table has some shadows which I cannot ignore. Here we go. This grape has some shadows, and especially the bear should have a lot of shadows here. Why? Because the light is coming again from this direction, which means my shadow should be casted right here. I can use now the other direction, just a little bit. I can go a little bit darker with the table. As you see now, I'm using cross hatching, different kind of angles or direction. So here, right below the bear or the piece of fruit, I can go really dark a little bit, yeah, because this is actually the darkest area in the whole image. Because why? Because it's way too far from the light source. Here we go. Here we go. I can add some very light tone right here, and maybe just to harmonize everything together. Here some shadow needs to be casted a little bit behind the piece of fruit. I don't want to lose the line of my bear or the piece of fruit, so that's why I'm highlighting it a little bit, just tiny bit, yeah, to make it a little bit stronger. Here we go. These grapes should also cast some shadow because the light is coming from this area, which means a shadow will be casted right here a little bit. And this branch should also have a shadow. The more you deal with the lighting and light source and shading, and you try it out on paper, the more you understand it, and you really can tell directly. Once you know the light direction, you will be able to directly tell where your shadow should be casted. And that's why I don't think a lot about it. As you see here, I immediately figure out that my shadow definitely needs to be casted right here because the light is coming from this direction. And this comes only with practice. So the more you practice, the more you draw, and the more you understand your drawing, your proportions, lighting, shading, and so on. All of these very important elements of drawing. Here we go. As I am moving with my shading, I always keep in mind and try not to forget where my light is coming from. To avoid, for example, having very dark tone here, which will not fit anymore at all in our case, right? Because the light is coming from this direction. So I always try to keep in mind where my light is coming from and try to not forget it, yeah? Here we go. These can be a little bit darker. Here we go. Some shadow needs to be casted as well here. Everything that is covered by these grapes needs to be darker here a little bit. Here we go. Here we go. I always try to keep the whole shading, so the shading of the all objects and components harmonized together, because it's very important. And that's why I'm moving sometimes here, sometimes on the right. I don't focus on one area and completely forget about the others, because it's very important, yeah, to keep it all harmonized. So as you see now, I can use also some shadows right here, because again, my light is coming from the right, which means it's hitting this area and casting shadow right below the piece of fruit, which is here. As you see, now it looks much better and much more realistic. And it tells me immediately where my light is coming from. Here we go. For the table, I decided to go a little bit even darker by using P6 or even P10 to give me this kind of like very dark feeling, which I really need and I want here, right below the piece of fruit. Here we go. Now it looks good. So I can continue for an hour or two, even adding more details and more reflection and more shading into my drawing. But for the sake of time of our session, I'm gonna just end it right here. So keeping it simple and not to make it too complicated, because as I said previously, the session is meant to be for, especially for beginners. So try it out, enjoy it, and if you want to redraw the same drawing, you can rewatch the video again and again and try to do it step by step as I guided you through the whole process. Try it out. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Making mistakes will only make you stronger and make you better and better in drawing. And no one starts perfect, so we all start from zero, or from any area, from any point, and gets better and better only by practicing when it comes to drawing, proportions, scales, shading, lighting, and so on. So try it out. Have fun. Don't be afraid to make any mistakes, as I said. And if you like the video, just hit the like, comment if you have any questions, of course, and subscribe to my channel if you aren't. I hope it was helpful, and thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.